meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. One thing that little kids like to do quite often is play make-believe. They'll pretend to be superheroes, astronauts, kings and queens, or whatever the fancy. And pretending to be a royal sovereign is still popular. To be the king of the treehouse or whatnot, having total authority over all your subjects, at least until mom announces it's time to come home for dinner. But there was a baby who was literally born the king of a major modern European nation. And this young king grew up to be the biggest gearhead ever to wear a crown. His Majesty Alphonso XIII, King of Spain. Born at the Royal Palace in Madrid in 1886, the baby king's father, Alphonso XII, had died about 6 months before he was born, and young Al was his only legitimate son. The birth of the baby boy was celebrated throughout Spain and beyond. Within days of his birth, he was lauded, wrapped in a golden fleece, and proclaimed king. Of course, he would need to grow up a bit before actually taking on true kingly duties, and his mother, Queen Maria, was regent for his first 16 years, ruling on his behalf and in his name until he was mature enough to do the job himself. Thus, he would receive an education fit for a king. Military school, languages, arts, sciences. The boy king was provided the best tutors, scholars, and campuses that Spain had to offer. And being king, young Al got pretty much what he wanted during the time. And one of the things he wanted was not to be chauffeured. He liked to ride his own horse and to drive his own coach instead of just being a passenger. Even at 6 years old, he wanted to be the coach driver, and yes, he got what he wanted. The 1890s saw the first generation of cars hit the streets of Europe, and young Alphonso decided that he wanted to drive some of these newfangled automobiles. He was the ripe age of 12 when he procured a Peugeot cycle car and began to drive it all over the palace grounds. He began to collect different cars, Benzes, Daimlers, Panhards, and others, and drive them, modify them, experiment with them, essentially to play with his cars. By the time he was 16 and began to rule of Spain without his mother, Lucky Al was an experienced and skilled driver, and his passion for cars would be felt throughout Spain and beyond. His official reign began in 1902, and getting his country into cars was a priority on his agenda. Within a year, he arranged the establishment of Spain's first auto racing authority, the Royal Automobile Club of Spain. This club still exists, and not only officiates Spanish road racing, but also, like the American Automobile Association, offers insurance and roadside assistance services. Also, he wanted to host a big Grand Prix race and, working with the Automobile Club of France, organized the 1903 Paris to Madrid race. Alphonso himself wanted to participate in the race, but the members of his court were terrified at the idea of risking his life in such a spectacle, and he was dissuaded. This was likely for the better, as dozens lost their lives in this race, and it was called off due to the carnage after just the first leg of the race was completed. But King Al was born to drive and to race, and he wanted big cars to do them with. Unfortunately, big cars were not being built in Spain, but our friendly neighborhood king would change that. At his insistence and no small amount of his backing financially, a company was founded in Spain to make the best sports and luxury cars anywhere in Europe, the Hispano-Suiza, in 1904. Hispanos were an instant hit, with Mark Burgett at the design helm, and these cars were an international sensation on and off the track. Indeed, perhaps their most famous model was named after him, the Alphonso, which was in production from 1910 through to the beginning of the First World War. In 1906, he married the youngest granddaughter of Queen Victoria, Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg, who would of course become the Queen of Spain as a result. And her new husband wanted to explore the countryside by car with his bride. By this time he owned so many cars that even Jay Leno would be jealous, and to the constant worry of his erstwhile court, would often take off with her on a drive through the Spanish countryside. A newspaper reporter once wrote of his motoring escapades in 1907, writing as follows: "The stately grandees of his court are horrified at the idea of their king tearing about the country at 40 miles an hour, to find out for himself what he wants to know about his people. He shares the accidents of the road with the humblest motorists in the land, and takes them with the good nature of a true sportsman." End quote. These outings, as nerve-wracking as they were to his security staff, showed the king the state of motoring in Spain, as well as the road conditions. And he insisted to his court staff that Spanish roads and traffic laws be updated to accommodate automobiles. Alphonso was a car nut throughout his life, racing them, driving them. Many would state that the world's first sports car was in fact the Hispano-Suiza Alphonso of 1910, which was inspired by him. Never before or since has a major head of state been a total gearhead like King Alphonso XIII of Spain. Lucky Al, born to be king with a passion to keep himself and his people driving. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.